unprepared sports anime fan podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a very special guest, Matt.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't prepared to answer that. Yeah, hi.
All right, so today we are finally beginning the new winter season. This is going to be we're going to be covering both the first and second week of the winter season with all of the sports anime that aired in between January 2nd to January 15th.
Right.
Um, we probably should have done an episode last week because we didn't realize how much was airing, so we're going to be doing a lot of double ups this week.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the reason that I initially suggested we not do a normal episode last week was because we wouldn't have been able to do the first episode of Yowamushi Pedal, which is something we're
Right.
both looking forward to. What I didn't realize, because I didn't put in the work to break it down, is that we would have been able to do an episode of everything else. Um,
Yeah.
so it's fine. It's
Yeah,
just
it's no big deal. We got a chance to watch Princess Stride, which, if you haven't watched that episode, please go watch it. We love that episode.
Well, yeah, yeah. So that was a fun a little experiment to go through of doing a series review for something we hadn't done on the show. So that was fun, and I think worthwhile for us, if not for anyone else. Um, but yeah, so we're back, and now moving forward, starting next week with week 3, we'll just have a single episode of each show per week. Up until we finally get those last 2 episodes of Long Riders. Um, so, like I promised a few weeks ago, we're gonna start highlighting some of the reviews that we get on iTunes, and some other social stuff as it comes up. So, like I said, if you give us a positive review, if you give us a 5 star on iTunes, we'll read it on the air. You can be a part of KoshienCast history. That's pretty fun. And we'll probably highlight some other stuff, like if we get questions or comments, we may bring those up on the podcast too. So, like I said, feel free to contact us through any of our social media. We're KoshienCast on everything. We're on email. We're KoshienCast@gmail.com. But first, the review. So we actually got this review before the episode aired, where we talked about doing this. And it is from a user named Tennessee Tweety. Though I will just refer to them as Tennessee from here on. It's a little lengthy, but I'm going to read the part and then summarize the rest. So Tennessee says, "Thank you for a excuse me." The title of the review, before I go into it, is "Finally," in all caps, "I have a home," which big words. Um, Tennessee says, "Thank you for a podcast that focuses solely on the sports anime genre. I listen to many anime YouTubers and podcasters that give barely a mention to sports titles, let alone a thoroughly detailed and analytical review. Only the best or most popular titles like Haikyuu or Yuri on Ice are talked about with any seriousness. I found your podcast and binge listened during the holiday break, so I've been able to take notice of constant improvements you've made on the cast format, but I also have a technical criticism." And he goes on for a bit to basically break down some of the audio issues we'd had, particularly in episode 13. And so we totally appreciate that. We want to get
Yeah.
feedback on stuff where we're messing up. We appreciate the positivity, though, the fact that you're enjoying the podcast. Tennessee, hope you're still with us, and yeah, we're working to sort of balance out our audio levels because
Yeah.
it,
So let
it,
me just give a very brief summary about what the issue with the audio is. Sometimes, so I have a very loud, booming voice,
hmm
and Matt here is not quite as loud as I am.
no
So we often are. And since I do a lot of the audio, I have to struggle to try and balance out the our voices so that one doesn't come off too loud and one doesn't. One comes off a little better, but I don't listen to like the entire episode. I just kind of listen to brief clips to kind of see, and I just kind of like, okay, that sounds fine, and then I sort of throw it up there. So I'm working on trying to make sure that it balances out a little better now. So I'll keep looking into ways that we can solve that.
Yeah, and the particular episode, because he specifically mentioned episode 13, and that was kind of an outlier, because on episode 13, we recorded it together in person,
Right.
and we only used one mic, which is,
So,
kind of a
which when we
rookie
don't have
mistake.
two, yeah, when I don't have two audio tracks to cover, like to kind of mess with individually, it's a lot more difficult to mess up the to alter the audio, so it can get a little tricky sometimes. But hey, you know what? We appreciate you bringing that up because it is something I do need to work on.
Yeah, and so that when we were together in person, it's basically impossible to alter the fact that I'm much quieter than you are.
Right.
So anyway, but we appreciate your feedback, appreciate your kind words. Glad we could provide you a home for sports anime. That's sort of what we intended to do. People that are interested in the genre. And who else out there is going to give you a weekly breakdown of Long Riders?
Right.
Nobody. That's who. For good reason. And then I also just wanted to give a quick shout out to our most frequent commenter on the YouTube side, Rena. So
Right.
Rena, throughout the fall season, gave us a lot of really interesting critical feedback on our analysis, particularly with Yuri on Ice, but also engaged with the other material. We enjoyed going back and forth with Rena, and appreciated the enthusiasm. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to identify the fact that does not go unappreciated. We love hearing from people who are listening to the episode, hear about maybe something we misinterpreted or could learn from, and just being able to learn more from all you guys, because you guys probably know more than we do most of the time. So
Right.
anyway, so all that being said, do we want to kick it off with our first new show?
Yeah, let's kick it off with Yowamushi Pedal, New Generation, hereby referred to as Yawapita, and probably never again by the full title.
I was thinking of we have to shorten the whole thing, because Yowamushi Pedal became Yawapeda, so now
Right.
this season has to be Yawapeda Engine.
All right, sounds good to me. So, covering Yawapita Engine, uh, we begin with a cold opening with uh, the main three first years, which would be Onoda, Iwaizumi, and Naruko, being told off by Onoda's mother being mad that they hid the fact that Onoda was actually part of their cycling team, like a major part of it, even though if I recall from last season, they frequently tried to explain that to her and she didn't get it. Uh, this serves as just sort of a reminder of the main events from what happened at the end, because it's been a while since the first season, or the second season rather. So anyway, it ends with her mother kind of getting over, or Anoda's mother getting over it and being like, hey, just keep working hard for the team. Then what happens is we get kind of the sequence of both Iwaizumi and Anoda going off to the Kanzaki bike shop, which is where Miki and Tuji work, and they have been building new bikes for the first year characters. Iwaizumi gets he gets electrical gears, which gives him a more instantaneous gear shift. Anoda gets a lighter frame because he's always had a bit of a heavier frame, and it's a little bit of a more of a struggle for him to be a climber with such a heavy frame. And then Naruko, he becomes he gets like chrome wheels. So yes, I see you highlighting the Amaizumi. My bad.
Yeah.
And so they go off, and they're getting really confident. They're really happy about their new bikes, and they think like, hey, we're gonna keep getting stronger and stronger here. And so we have kind of just two other like little plots that happen here. First of all, we have Makishima, who is he was the third year climber. He was kind of the fan favorite character of the entire series. Anyway, he puts in his resignation notice from the club because he has to move across seas to live with his brother, and he's going to start going to college there. But he didn't want to tell anybody because this is coming off the news to everybody, and everybody gets very upset and like, hey, why didn't he tell us this? But Makishima, being kind of a bit of a loner, decides to go on one last climb up their old up the hill that's near their school, the Minagama Hill, and by chance, Onoda comes by and he asks Onoda to if he wants to go on a climb with him. Onoda, being unaware that this is his last time, gonna, his last time cycling with them. First, Onoda says, "Hey, I don't." It's like, "Hey, I just got off of the hill. I'm not gonna go back out there again." But then, kind of has a second thought. It's like, you know what? Something tells me I should maybe do this. And so they have a climb together. It's all very fun. And then finally we wrap up with the sort of like a farewell to the third year. So to Shingo and to Tadakoro, who are passing the torch essentially and stating, "Hey, great job, great work, guys. Let's keep it at like." We're really proud of you guys, and they nominate Teshima to be the new captain and Aoyagi to be the vice captain. And their first and Teshima's first decree as captain is to make sure that they understand to that they need that like they can't get complacent now. They have to keep now they have to deal with the pressure and burden of being champions and making sure that they keep that up. And so so for their very first act as captains, they set up a 15-kilometer race to get to like the street light when they're out on their normal ride. And effectively, what they realize is that the pair has actually still been training and working since that while they were at the Inter High, while they were working at the Inter High, like working towards it. And they basically these two actually beat them, kind of putting them in their place and being like, look, you guys can't get this confident about your past victory and the fact that you guys got these new bikes. Like, you need to keep working. And that's kind of where the episode ends. Also with Anoda, like, realizing that he's struggling a lot because he's still getting used to this new lighter frame.
Well, yeah. I think getting used to the frame was part of it, but it
Right.
was. I think it was communicated that he was still hung up on Makishima leaving. Um,
Oh.
that like part of the reason that he wasn't able to quite live up to his potential or whatever is that he wants to he feels overwhelmed with trying to replace Makishima and live up to
Oh.
his expectations as a climber.
Okay. Okay. So I guess what they're trying to do there is they're kind of trying to connect this new bike to this personal growth that he needs to go through, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Overall, it was sort of it was an adjustment getting back into
Right.
Yowapeda for me. I was a little surprised by the art style, and I don't know if that's just me having distance from it, but I don't remember it being like as goofy as it was. Um,
It's always been a little goofy. I do think you just have to get back to used to it. Now, the thing that I noticed was that I feel like they're using a lot more CG now because
mm,
if maybe they used CG in the first place, and I wasn't really quite used to seeing it that much because I got into Yawapeda pretty much as soon as I was getting back. It was kind of when I was getting back into anime,
right.
so maybe I didn't have as quite of a critical eye in that regard. But I was seeing a lot of really noticeable CG, and it was kind of distracting
Hmm.
because it really kind of it uses CG better than something like Long Riders, the other
Yeah,
cycling series that we've been watching lately, because they're generally smart enough to anytime they use CG, they generally use it during fast motion, like when they're going down the hill and you're getting like a long shot, generally just as a way to sort of convey like kind of a cost cutting measure so that they don't have to meticulously animate like everything that's going on. But yeah, it's definitely noticeable, and it does take me out of it a little bit.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I thought the episode was fine.
Yeah,
It sort of caught you up with like setting the stage for the new plots. Like, okay,
right,
yeah, I mean, the captains are these second years you kind of ignored the entire second season, but
right.
turns out they have enormous calves, so that's
Right.
so how about
Well,
that?
they mentioned it's like, hey, they've been training for a while. They were training while you guys were focusing on the inner high. They never actually
Well, I
stopped.
guess, but that doesn't like give an an advantage because it's not as if the first years weren't training for the Interhigh. Like they were
Right.
all training.
I guess what you could argue is that because they were because for the Interhigh they have to make sure that they're a little bit better rested so that they can go all out during the main event.
I guess.
But and so they don't have to worry about stuff like that, so they can do like a little bit more experimental stuff. The episode didn't really
Yeah.
cover it that
It
well.
it felt a little bit like anime reasoning.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit. Just like, oh, well, you guys were focusing on that. They were still practicing it. Like, well, I mean, we were practicing too. We
Exactly.
were.
It's like, well, you idiots were off focusing on biking. They could stay behind and focus on biking.
Yeah, kind of a little bit. That being said, I do kind of appreciate because I thought they might have tried. Cause the series does have a bit of a tendency to focus on its first year cast a little too hard. So I thought they might have tried to go in the direction of making Imaizumi the captain.
Well, yeah.
And then Teshima and Aoyagi are like they're just kind of off to the side. They're still part of the team, but they may get their own like big arc considering the fact that they are effectively at this point new characters. I mean, I realize not quite. They were pretty well established in the first parts of the show, but they kind of fell off once the
Yeah.
Interhigh started.
Right.
But and especially with the at the end of the second season with Shingo effectively trying to pass the torch on to Imaizumi and telling him like you have to take up role as like the ace of the team, and I thought they were going to try and make him the captain as well. But I do appreciate that they were they gave it to the people with a little bit more experience.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
I think
and I thought that was a fine part of the episode.
no, yeah, and it was just there wasn't a whole lot to it.
Right. One other thing I did like that they did was this first part of the episode was basically like this big build up for Onoda and Maizumi and Naruko being like, yeah, we got these new bikes, we're getting upgraded, like they're gonna get even stronger now, and I do kind of appreciate at the very end it's like, yeah, it's actually not that big a deal, guys. Like, don't get too full of yourselves. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of appreciate that at least the series is willing to bring down its main cast.
Mm-hmm.
Just for this because too often I think like in any other series this might have been considered like a big power up, like this is their big upgrade, and now they're gonna have a bunch of events or they're gonna show off like, hey, this is how good it is, like this is how strong their new ability is, like Maizumi and his awesome like instant gear shift and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, it actually like it was kind of purposely done to kind of bring you down at the end.
Yeah. Um, just if we can predict a few things, what do you think are the odds that during the next Interhigh Imaizumi's battery is going to run out on his electric gear shifter?
They did set that up in this episode, didn't they? Because he's like, now remember, this battery can only last for 15 kilometers.
1500.
Oh, 1500. Sorry, I meant to say 1500.
Yeah, that would be a very ineffective battery.
Yeah. At that point, it's barely worth using. But yeah, no, that's probably a good point.
Yeah, so I mean that's I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if like Imaizumi just can't get through a race without his bike breaking,
Right.
because he just rides so hard or whatever. Um,
I
and
don't know. They may try and pull that off during the Interhigh if they end up getting to that this season. I could also see them like trying to set up a plot point, like maybe a different race that they end up doing where it does shut down to show that Imaizumi needs to learn to take better care of his bike. But
oh yeah,
as prep before the Interhigh.
yeah, that's fair. Um, but I don't know.
Uh, I'm a little worried based off of the opening that it seems like they're gonna try because they showed off this big sequence of like the new characters on the different teams, and I'm a little worried that they're going in the direction that we kind of feared, which is that they're just gonna try building up Hokone and Mitosuji again.
Hmm. Well, yeah. So Medosuji is definitely coming back. And it'll just be interesting to see whether he's grown any as a character. But
Right.
who knows?
But that opening did not instill, like, just based off of the animation there and what they showed, because it looks like, they do, like, both teams do, or Mitosuji's team and Hokone's team look like they both have like new members, and well, but it's like, yeah, it looks like they're still trying to build up Suji as a threat again, and we're still stuck on Hokone.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, it's a fine episode. I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out again, but it does kind of feel like we're gonna be going through the old motions again.
Yeah. Who knows? But if we want to move on to a show that is definitely not going through the motions.
Yeah, let's go on to March Comes In Like a Lion.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna cover episodes 12 and 13. We'll just talk about episode 12 first. It starts off with Ray being back at his apartment. So if you remember from episode 11, he had gotten a fever and he had to stay at the sister's house for a while, but he's finally recovered and he's back at his apartment. But he becomes overwhelmed with this sort of like dread and loneliness because his apartment is silent. He's all by himself. There's nobody
Right.
there. He needs to like go for a walk just to distract himself from how like he feels this depression overtaking him.
Right.
And that goes on. That's a pretty extended sequence, which just to bring up that even though they may not have focused on the depression aspect of this show recently, that's still a very real
Yeah.
thing in his life. Um, Moving on, he basically wants to get set for an upcoming tournament. It looks like it's sort of like an open tournament where pro shogi players across different levels can enter and compete for a pretty significant prize. They're competing like a single win in the tournament will net you about $6,000 or what is it 600,000 yen.
Right.
So Ray enters and he ends up competing alongside Mr. Smith, and so they both have their first match, and Ray and Mr. Smith both manage to win. Mr. Smith sets up a trap to win, and Ray just sort of outlasts his opponent and wins after 187 moves. Um, and they end up trying to develop his opponent, but I'm not quite sure it works. Anyway, after the match, Mr. Smith and Ray run into Gato, who is the guy who's been connected with Ray's older sister and Kyoko, and he basically threatens Ray again, because he beat him up before, and tells Ray to have Kyoko, who he refers to as that stalker girl, back off. Um, by the end of the episode, the chairman of the Shogi Association brings in some fish. He forces Ray to take some fish with him because that's what he does, and he brings them back to the sister's house. And
Right.
and Ray decides that he needs to, and even though he wants to stay at the sister's house, he needs to focus on training so that he can be ready to defeat Gato. Um,
Right. So, yeah, with this first episode, it reminded me a lot of the first episode, and as you know, I wasn't big on the first episode. There are a couple of things I liked in this episode. Like, one thing I really appreciated was the portrayal of depression at the very beginning of the episode. Because I love this quiet scene that plays out with Ray just sort of sitting there eating breakfast and being like, because it's like that just immediately cues you in if you've been following the series about like, yeah, this is becoming more and more unbearable, these like quiet scenes at
yeah,
Ray's apartment.
right.
Like you can feel the tension there, and like, and just how much he, like, you can feel just how much he is slowly not wanting to be there anymore. But what I also appreciated about it is that it kind of addresses this whole issue with depression where when you're kind of starting to get out of it, uh, it's it starts to feel very weird because you get so used to being in this malaise that it almost feels unreal once you're starting to feel happy again, and you kind of start falling back in like into old habits.
Hmm.
And that's something I really appreciated about how they portrayed that. And then the other thing I really liked was the very end of the episode where Ray basically sits down Momo and was like, "I'm really sorry, I can't spend the night here. I really have to get prepared for this match." And I thought, in a good parallel to the first episode, because the first episode involved Ray trying to avoid the sisters, kind of making excuses and like trying to get out of the way, like, I don't really want to spend time with them. It's like, I mean, they're nice, but I don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
get
yeah.
involved there. But here, this is an act of like, he's not making excuses to not stay with them. This is something he legitimately he understands he needs to do, and he's not. He's trying. Like, this is actually him actively like attempting something with his life
Mm-hmm.
rather than just kind of going through the motions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I mean, I I thought it was a strong episode overall.
Okay.
I think the most interesting thing is probably them setting up the conflict with Goto. And I
Right.
know I mispronounced his name during the opening, but yeah, it's Goto. But the sort of how it was interesting because when he was portrayed before, you never
Right.
actually saw him as a character. You just saw people talk about him, and so my
Right.
perception of him was that he was just like a bully, just a violent person. But he doesn't actually come off that way in the show. He comes off as a very big, strong person, um, but he doesn't come off as like a crazy person.
Right.
Um,
Well,
Go ahead.
it's interesting too because that was another part I did kind of like was the fact that it's kind of playing with our expectations of Kyoko because we've always seen her as being kind of this scheming this girl who's just constantly trying to get inside Ray says she has this love of control and like needing to show her control by like kind of abusing Ray almost. And like through Goto, we're kind of starting to get some doubts about that. It's like, is Kyoko actually insane?
Well, right, yeah. I mean, and what exactly is the nature of their relationship? Because she
Right,
clearly refers to Goto as her boyfriend, but then it's revealed in the episode Goto is married. Um,
right.
and so she always says, "Oh, Goto got me this watch. Goto did this for me. Did he? Did you steal it from his wife? Like, I don't know."
Right. Like, did you steal it from his wife, or you guys like were you just some sort of were you kind of like an affair Goto had? Because he kind of strikes me as the kind of guy who would probably have a couple of
Yeah,
girls on the
sure.
side of his marriage. Uh, And like, did he kind of have like an affair with you, and you just got completely and utterly overly attached to him after this? Like, what's going on there? So that I did like, and I should point out, I did like this episode more than the first episode.
Hmm.
Um, I think there were a couple times where it had a tendency to get a little overbearing with its explanation. Like, like at the very beginning of the episode, I love that little quiet moment in Ray's apartment. I don't particularly care for the fact that we need to get this explanation of like, oh, it's so boring and quiet here. I really wish I was back with those girls because it's very warm like a kotatsu.
Yeah, he said that about 4 times.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, guys, like, you all you needed was that quiet scene there. Maybe like a quick flash or like a cut to Ray hanging out with the apartment to kind of maybe drive the point home a little bit here. You don't need to keep bringing home the point that yeah, Ray wants to spend time with the sisters now. Like that's really kind of what got me. That and you had kind of touched upon this a little bit. I wasn't big on the shogi games that they had played because they had this very like they tried to set up these two like opponents of Ray and Mr. Smith.
Hmm.
Like because Mr. Smith's opponent is supposed to be like he's I guess this fantasy nerd who's like seeing this game as actually being like an old school RPG, and it's not
That
really
was not
that
clearly communicated.
yeah, and it's not really that endearing of a trait. And then like Ray's opponent is this guy who keeps making bad jokes, and it's like this is starting to feel a little bit more like a traditional sports series. And one of the things that was interesting about March Comes In Like a Lion was that it had a much more human depiction of the characters.
Hmm.
And these two guys, they're just we're spending a lot of time on them and they're just not doing anything with me. It was getting a little too bombastic and happy for me, and I hate to say it like this, the show is not that interesting when it's happy.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it has its moments, but when it's being being like overly bombastic and silly, that's kind of like I kind of start to tune out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
But
know.
yeah. Did you have any other takeaways from this episode?
No, I mean it segues pretty clearly into episode 13, so we can just talk about that.
Okay, that's fair.
So with episode 13, the whole first half of the episode is just focused on Mr. Smith. So it begins with an extended sequence of him starting his day and just getting up and eating breakfast and walking to his match, and then sort of thinking about his upcoming match against Goto, and thinking about his own style of shogi, and then playing the actual game against Goto. And so they show extended sequences of that game
Right.
in which Smith ends up losing, and Goto sort of lectures him a little bit on staying true to himself. uh,
Right.
and then in the second half, Ray remembers that he's actually met his opponent Shimada before. When Ray was a kid, Shimada came to like a children's shogi event and lectured on his shogi style. And Ray can only remember that he was really boring, and he couldn't actually remember his style beyond the fact that he played defensively. Um,
Right.
and then when they're actually playing the game, without knowing exactly how it happened, Ray realizes that he was lulled into a trap and that he um, is not able to respond effectively to Shimada's attacks.
Right.
And at the very end, you see a flashback from Shimada's perspective where he's talking to Nikaido. And Nikaido refers to Shimada as his brother and tells him that he needs to crush Ray. So it doesn't really explain why that happened, but it happened.
Right. Okay, so much like with the first episode, how I was started growing up more on the second episode, I like this episode a lot more. I thought the focus on Mr. Smith was a lot more interesting because it showed sort of it was kind of a weird little vignette, I guess, of just what it's like for just sort of this mediocre, like not even mediocre, but this a player who's basically just kind of playing as a means to sort of get by in life.
Right.
Like like Mr. Smith, we kind of see with Mr. Smith like this whole like he kind of comes up with this plan and even kind of talks to himself like, yeah, like I have this plan in place, but I actually don't even see like a world and like I don't even see a future in which I win this.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, yeah, and even but when he gets to the match, he's like, okay, well maybe I can do this. Maybe maybe this is something I can do. Like I got this plan in place. Maybe it'll work. And then no, of course it doesn't work. And it kind of ends with Mr. Smith taking home like kind of like sort of getting depressed to himself, but not really letting it get to him too much. Like he kind of jokes around, like, okay, well, let's see. I'm either gonna go home, either I'm gonna go to a hostess bar, or I'm just gonna go home and cry to myself tonight. Let's see what I'm gonna do. And he ends up actually taking home a cat. Like,
Sure, why
it,
not?
yeah, because it's like it shows that it's like, okay, loss sucks, but it's not that big a deal. You get through it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of my big takeaway from the Mr. Smith section.
Yeah, well, so what did you think they were trying to do with the beginning of the episode? Because they sort of had uh, like a jazz music extended
Right.
over a single tracking shot of Mr. Smith waking up and preparing his breakfast for several
Right?
minutes. What
Yeah,
what did
for
you?
like this goes on for like 3-4 minutes.
Yeah.
First of all, like, so these are my two takeaways from it. So artistically, I think what they're trying to do is that they're setting this episode up as being a day in the life.
Mm,
Like, this immediately gets us into the mindset of, okay, so this is just going to be following Mr. Smith. This is just another normal day for him. He gets up, he makes himself breakfast. He apparently kind of eats a bit like a maniac.
yeah.
Uh, But this is because the one thing that they do interrupt this tracking shot with sometimes is they have like little sections where you like discolored visions of like the shogi board, not really like menacing, just sort of like I think we're supposed to take this as Mr. Smith kind of like going over shogi in his head, like okay, so this move goes here, blah blah blah,
Right.
and I think what they were trying to do there was just kind of convey, this is just going to be how Mr. Smith lives his life. And on that level, I do appreciate it. It does go on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, and this is the bit more of a cynical view of it, they needed to fill out this episode, but they let their animator have a little bit of fun to see what they could do with the tracking shot.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun and unique. It's not the kind of sequence you normally see in anime.
Right.
So,
Right, because like it's an anime. Like you don't generally need such long, continuous shots. But hey, you know what? I kind of appreciate that they did include that there.
I also liked it because they did a somewhat similar thing with the match itself, where
Yeah,
they
yeah.
would have extended sort of like overhead shots of the shogi board, and you would just
Right.
see the two pairs of hands moving back and forth and moving their pieces. And what I liked was they were all very detailed and very human movements. Because
Right.
several times, at least you didn't see Goto do it, I think, but you saw Mr. Smith a couple times. He would move a piece, but in moving it, he would accidentally knock aside another piece. So he would like put down his
Yeah.
piece, get it in place, and then adjust another one. And it looked, it looked the way that human hands move.
Yeah,
Um,
and because I made note of that myself, and what they do about that is that they do establish the difference between these two players by doing that.
without having to show facial expressions or anything, it's just hand movements.
Right. Like they have this instant like they do these like so you can see Mr. Smith like how he's struggling, like he's not nearly as in control of the board or these pieces as much as Goto is.
Right.
And it's like and it's a great human way to show this without actually having to go deep into their heads.
Yeah, say, oh boy, I sure am nervous about playing Goto.
It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's like it communicates that. This is what I love from the series. These sort of like it assumes you can understand what they're going for there. It does this. It's like it's very human motion and animation, but it's there to. It's not just there to be showy. It's
Mm-hmm.
there to actually communicate something about the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, uh, so what did you think about the Ray half of the episode?
The very half of the episode was fine. I did like how I like how they showed that Ray was sort of losing to this sort of faceless opponent.
Yeah.
Like that's what I really enjoyed about it was the fact that it's like okay, so like because the previous episode was trying to set up like this valiant struggle that Ray is going to have against Goto. They're almost establishing this like kind of like a hot blooded like sports battle thing where it's just
Yeah.
like Ray has to take down the evil player.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like no, like Ray is actually losing to a nobody right now.
Well, it's not that he's a nobody. It's just that he's not seeing him because this guy
Right.
does outrank Ray.
Right,
Um,
and I do understand that, but I think the way I took it was that like Ray was essentially seeing this man as a nobody. This was just another guy who was in the way of.
right.
Like even though he was trying to, he was going over Shimada stuff. He kind of acknowledged the fact that Shimada was, his next opponent. And he couldn't go on to beat Goto or fight Goto until he beat him. There was still kind of this mentality of, this guy, he's not really that important. He's not
Yeah.
really important in the grand scheme of things. This is just a guy I have to get through. Not that I need to ignore him, but the fact that he's like, he's basically just in my way in getting to Goto.
Yeah, but then that person, it'd be very easy for the show to just set up, oh yeah, Ray has to beat Goto. That's how this has to work.
Right.
And they just make this match incidental so they can show a little more of Mr. Smith or whatever. But yeah, there is a great moment when Ray realizes he's actually losing, and he looks up,
Right.
and you see Shimada's face for the first time, and Shimada comments like, "Oh, he's finally looking at me,"
It's like, oh, you're actually looking at me now. What's going on here?
because even the way that even the way the episode was directed, you didn't see Shimada's face until Ray saw his face, which I thought
Right.
was a nice addition there. Um, Yeah, so it'll make the subsequent episode probably interesting to see whether Ray can get out of that or not. I think if he loses, that would be pretty interesting because it's setting up this big important moral conflict between him and the evil
Right.
player, and to be denied that opportunity, might be interesting. Um,
Uh,
I don't know.
Real quick, you kind of touched on this about the whole thing with Nikaido asking this older brother character
Yeah.
to crush Ray, and like I don't know how much I'm going to take from that because this was a shot from when Nikaido was a kid, and he just because if you remember, Nikaido was really upset with Ray like after his big loss to Ray because it seemed like Ray was looking down on him.
Oh.
So I think he was just being an angry little child and being like, yeah, I just want you to go beat him up, big bro.
Oh.
Uh,
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I didn't understand it.
Basically crying and being like,
I know.
I want you
I'm
to
just
go.
kidding. I
Okay.
understood it. I just thought you sounded ridiculous. Um,
Fair enough. So it's like because I think they were trying to end it on being this it's like is Nikaido actually playing this long game against Ray? I don't think so.
yeah.
Like I think that's maybe like that's almost a bit too cynical of a view of this show.
Yeah.
Uh, and Nikaido does not strike me as that kind of guy to just like obviously embarrass himself and like in public basically proclaiming his love for Ray on like national television
Mm-hmm.
or like staying overnight with him by getting him like it's like I'll get him back by buying him a bed.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so I don't really take that as being too much. I think they're trying to set it up so to get people to watch the next episode, but I don't really take that as being as quite that menacing.
Okay. Fair enough. So, do you want to talk about another show with menacing characters?
Yeah, let's talk about All Out.
Okay.
Okay, so episode 13 is actually a flashback episode about the formation of the current rugby team. Now, there was the rugby team has always been there, but it really changed around once Hachioji joined the team.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and he met Sekizan by chance at the ba- uh, basically at like the intro ceremony and being like, hey, you'd be great at rugby. Like he just saw what he looked like. He's like, yeah, you're a huge dude. Your physique is built for rugby. And then he just keeps harassing Sekizan to join the team but Sekizan doesn't really want to.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, there's this crazy guy that keeps following him around and won't leave him alone. And Sekizan, explains to him like, "Look, I'm actually not that great at sports. Like, I know I got a big body, but I don't really have much coordination because any sport with like involving catching or like any sort of movement with a ball, he's actually been pretty bad at." But eventually, Hachioji keeps bugging him, and Sekizan almost ends up joining the team, but he sees actually how the other players are and how they're just leaving before even the sun goes down. Like they're not really like working that hard. They're not taking the sport seriously. And Sekizan's like, okay, I see what's happening here. Now you're just trying to get me to join the team to fill out your numbers. You guys don't really care much about the sport. Or even if you do, this is a team that does not.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hachioji and Sekizan ends up joining the track team, and Hachioji, still tries to convince him to join, and Sekizan will have none of it, being like, like rugby clearly just seems like a dumb sport anyway, like if it doesn't inspire this passion in people, which is the first time that Hachioji has ever shown any sort of like real like anger towards Sekizan for belittling the sport. And eventually, Hachioji keeps stalking Sekizan and then he arranges for basically what happens is Sekizan finds a love letter in his locker one day, and he sees a girl off to the side. He's like, oh, like what's going on? And she runs away and kind of escapes him. And then Sekizan, after finally giving up the chase, reads the note and realizes this is just Hachioji trying to get me to join the team again because we find out that this girl was his sister. But then he sees a second part of the note where it says where Hachioji explains like, look, even if the team kind of sucks right now, you and we can change it around. And Sekizan is about to go visit him to basically tell him to cut it all like once and for all. but he sees how passionate Hachioji is, like, out practicing in the rain by himself. And he's like, okay, well, this is maybe the type of guy I can actually be friends with. And then the episode kind of ends from there.
Right. But yeah, no, I thought it was a good setup. My assumption going in, of course, was that Sekizan has always been Sekizan.
Right.
Um, I just sort of had this impression that he was always passionate about rugby, even if he was new to it. It was weird to see him not caring about rugby,
Right.
And
And, like, this is, again, something I really like about All Out is, uh, like, this is a rugby team that, like, doesn't really care. Like, this is just like any other team.
mm-hmm.
Like, this is like the average school. This is the average team. Uh, that they're just kind of this is just a school group for them. They don't particularly care that much about the sport or the passion. They're not one of those big schools. And a lot of sports anime, they try and play with this whole expectation of the big underdog story of, like, the small the small group with, like, a bunch of really passionate students,
Yeah.
like, who kind of rise up and take on the world with their own raw, like, determination and hard work. It's like, but yeah, All Out, like, I think they sell it a little better just because how the effort they go through to set up just how, like, uncaring this team was at first.
Well, yeah, I mean, how normal a team. It was just a group
Yeah.
of teenagers who enjoyed playing rugby sometimes. Um, and in the world of sports anime, that's like the ultimate sin of not planning to go to Koshien,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
um, but so Sekizan is not interested in a team that doesn't completely dedicate itself to working out until after the sun goes down. You know,
Yeah.
why would I waste my time if they're not going to work out like crazy people? Um, and so you see that reflected a little bit in how he develops later on. I have to admit, I was hoping, because when you see freshman Sekizan, he looks very different than he does as a third year. I was
Right.
hoping they were going to break down at what point his hair went crazy and why.
Maybe a future episode. That's what I'm gonna say. Maybe that's not something that happened until around, like, his second year or something.
I'm hoping there's a canon explanation for that hair.
Something I did really appreciate in this episode as well was that they did this whole, because I thought what they were doing with Hachioji was that they were going to try, like, Hachioji says something about how, like, oh, we get free stuff from like local restaurants and, like, other businesses, and Sekizan walks away uncaring, and then like Hachioji explains, like, we even get, like, free takoyaki or something like that, and then, like, Sekizan pauses, like, what?
Yeah.
And like Hachioji is like, oh, so that got your interest, right? It's like, are they really gonna do this? Where either it's like, are we gonna try and set up this whole character trait about Sekizan, where like, oh, he's the big tough guy, but oh, he's embarrassed by his love of sweets.
Yeah.
And they kind of in this episode they kind of play with going back and forth, because there's this frame story about how Hachioji and Sekizan are talking with some of the first year teammates, and like, there's a scene, like, after this happens where Sekizan is, like, just eating takoyaki there, and they're like, oh, so you really like sweet Sekizan? He's like, dude, I have an unrivaled sweet tooth. I love sweets.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the fact that it's like, okay, so that joke was not so much about, like, oh, he's the big tough guy with, like, a secret sensitive side. No, he just didn't want to talk to Hachioshi because he was weird and wouldn't leave him alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that he actually, like, proudly admits, like, yeah, I love sweet stuff. What?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that adds a lot to the characters of this show. This sort of openness about them.
Yeah, I agree. And then, but we didn't just get one episode of All Out. We got two. So,
Right.
you got a little more background on another character in the next episode of All Out. So you want to break that down for me?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So this episode actually focuses a lot on Coach Shingo, who wanted to. He's meeting with a former colleague of his, and he goes out to a restaurant that's actually uh, being headed by another former teammate of his, basically from back in their college days. And what happens is, like, Coach Shingo is talking with this other friend of his, this other former teammate of his, and they talk for a while. And what we find out about Shingo is that He actually, like, even though he has always given off the image of being stern, he's actually a lot nicer than he used to be because he became very embittered after college because his wife couldn't, like, she was unable to have children. And, he was just sort of like, he wasn't really seeing much, like, going on in his life. He ended up retiring and decided, like, he kind of started up this rugby blog just sort of as a way to kill time, after, like, during retirement.
Right.
And that's what he had planned on for coaching. And but he actually really loves coaching these kids. Like, it actually gives him a lot of fun. It's like having children again. And I love this conversation that he has with this colleague of his who's like, yeah, you're gonna have to introduce the kids to the wife. And he's like, I kind of don't want to because I kind of like just letting this be my own thing, but I realize I can't be selfish about this.
Right.
And it's we also find out about his former teammate that he's actually a coach himself because he loves working with kids. He loves like watching kids, be really fiery and passionate about things. He loves watching them, like, teaching them rugby.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part of the episode kind of focuses on Sekizan. Or what happens is a character that we don't even know by the name of Keita. He's kind of this sort of no-name first year. I guess he's always been around in the background,
Mm-hmm.
but he ends up quitting the team because their practices are just way too hard on him. Like, he's at the point where he can't eat or sleep anymore because he's just that exhausted. Like, he can't hold down food. And this really affects Sekizan because, he doesn't want anybody to, like, leave the team. He's like, hey, we can tone down practices. He's like, dude, I'm not going to do that to the team. Like, we don't need to, like, everybody else can handle this, but, like, I don't want to adjust how we practice just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of makes, they're kind of setting up this whole, like, big promise between Sekizan and Keita, like, that, okay, so we'll make it to Hanazono for you. But that kind of turns Sekizan almost into a madman because he starts getting really hard on Gion during their big training camp at the beach. And he starts shouting at Gion, just like, you're being way too reckless and you're being way too like, you gotta be, like, perfect at this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can't just keep going at this like you are. You're failing right now. And then there's this, and sort of after practice, they're all kind of walking away, and but Sekizan is still practicing. He's still out running, and Shingo kind of confronts him as just like, okay, I know you're a little torn up, but you got to calm down just a little bit. You don't want people to be reckless, but frankly, your recklessness is kind of what's gotten to you guys to where you are. I know you want to make it to Hanazono for Akeda, but, remember, resting is important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't just be tearing yourself up just trying to get to Hanazono. Like, you guys are going to start seeing, you guys are already seeing massive improvements. Just let it run its course, okay? And then some of the other members of the team are also kind of there, and they kind of, like, help cheer up Sekizan. Like, Sekizan's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not entirely alone in this.
Yeah.
And then the very last shot of the episode is Hachioji getting a text from, I think, from Issei, who says he's talking to his brother. And my takeaway from that was, Issei is the one with the brother who's basically fell out of love with rugby, right?
Oh yeah.
I think that's who that was supposed to be.
Hmm.
So yeah, what was your takeaway from the episode?
I don't know. I liked the characterization of the coach, where you got to see a little bit more of his personality, because it's true, and they even kind of commented on the episode where he say like, "Oh, you're so harsh." He's like, "It's kind of crazy, but the kids are scared of me." And they're like, "Well, yeah, it's because you never smile." He's like, "Oh, right." Um, but you get to see a little bit more of his personality and the fact that he derives a lot of joy. It was slightly ham-fisted that, like, he can't have kids, so these
Yeah.
are his kids. Get it? Which, whatever. I don't really care.
Yeah, kinda.
Because yeah, it was a little on the nose, but I appreciated the clarity.
It's a different perspective than what we get from a lot of sports series because this, like, the coach is always kind of seen as being this very distant character from the rest of the crew. Like, they're kind of there and they're sort of there, like, to kind of, like, inspire them, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the it's kind of the team that kind of trains itself. That's kind of the cliche. It's the team that really raised themselves, and the coach is just kind of there to give them some a little advice. But no, it's kind of refreshing to see. Like, no, the coach is actually kind of the coach himself is actually like a character in this story.
Yeah,
He's as much a part of this team.
how often does a coach have his own motivation?
Yeah, exactly. Like beyond just I just like I just like passing on the knowledge of my sport that I played, and I like watching the kids, but this is really their team. It's just like
Right.
Shingo is as much a part of this team as anybody else, and I really love that getting the like really getting into his character.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then I also kind of like we've talked about this again. The series almost feels like it's about to go into this direction of hard work is going to solve everything. Like beating yourself down to the bone is what's going to is going to be what solves everything. But you have characters who are leaving because like it's not even so much that they want to; it's that they can't handle the practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just they are physically like becoming unwell because of it.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is that Sekizan was so cavalier to say, "Oh, we need to practice more. Fine, we'll practice twice a day before school and after school." Uh,
Right.
and he just said that like it was nothing without even consulting. But like there are ramifications to that decision, and some people will appreciate it, but some people will get burned out because
Right.
that's a lot of work to put someone through.
Right, exactly. Like Katie even mentions, like, look, I don't even really want to leave the team. Like, you all are my friends. I like you guys, but I can't handle this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm actually dying.
Right.
Like, and again, I kind of appreciate this is a series that's like, okay, yes, hard work is very important, and if this is something you want to do, you have to work towards it. But remember, guys, you don't need to do stuff that's going to kill you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, remember, guys, temper yourselves. And I like the fact that the coach even mentions, like, look, I know you guys are working hard, but remember, like, Sekizan, remember, just because you're working hard, like, this isn't good for you either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did appreciate they had a short period where so Keita dropped off that resignation notice with Yoshida,
Right.
who is the team advisor. I appreciated the fact that Yoshida appeared because when he first appeared, he'd been an uncaring, cynical character. And now it's very clear that even though he may not be best buddies with these kids, like
Yeah.
he's empathetic. Um,
Right.
and so he comes over and he sits down and he talks to Sekizan about it. And he clearly cares and he knows Sekizan's gonna be affected by it and he wants to like be sensitive to that, which I thought was a good development.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like these are very like these characters feel very human to me in a way that a lot of sports anime like a lot of sports battle anime don't tend to.
Yeah. So speaking of anime that doesn't seem human, do you want to talk about Tiger Mask?
Yeah, let's do Tiger Mask, buddy.
Okay. So yeah, so we got Tiger Mask episodes 13 and 14 this week. So episode 13 really wrapped up the first major arc of the show
Of
with
course.
the final match of the Masked Fighters World Tournament, whatever. Um, it was a little confusing though because the episode started off with the introduction of two other wrestlers, and they were female GWM wrestlers who had sort of an
Right.
exhibition match. Um, and even though they were fighting before the masked world tournament, neither of them were masked, but whatever. Not going to comment on that, I guess. Uh, where you had the match between Queen Elizabeth and Pain Fox. Um, and they were supposed to have a half-hour match, but then Miss X told them to cut it short to be a 10-minute match so that Tiger Mask would have less time to recover. And the
Right.
match is kind of a non-event. It sort of fills up the episode, but then so you see, oh no, Tiger Mask had to go into the match sooner than he expected. He's not well rested, and he has to fight Yellow Devil. And so all of that was kind of like humdrum, but they
Right.
clearly saved up anything that they had left in the bottom of the piggy bank for this sequence against Yellow
Yeah.
Devil. Because it was a really well animated fight. Uh, it's really the only truly well animated fight since Red Death Mask early
Yeah,
on in the
definitely.
show. Um, and it was exciting. We actually simul-watched this one together, and we both enjoyed it a lot. They had the revelation of Tiger Mask's fully evolved finisher move, which he still doesn't have a name for, but that was pretty cool to see. And then he knocks Yellow Devil unconscious and pulls him up, takes off his mask, but reveals that it's actually Billy the Kid Man, which is great. Just a great villain name, by the way. Billy the
Right.
Kid Man
Oh,
under the mask, and that it can't be the original Yellow Devil who attacked Daisuke because Billy the Kid Man was with that Yellow Devil on that trip, so he knows they're
right.
different people. And it's at this point that so Tiger Mask wins the tournament, but he destroys the trophy in anger, and then Tiger the Dark realizes that Tiger Mask and him are on the same side, but they don't do anything about it.
Yeah,
Um,
they just kind of walk off and are like, okay, cool.
yeah, and I'm just gonna move on and talk about Tiger Mask 14 too,
Oh,
and then
please
we'll
do
we'll
so.
just go back. And so in episode 14, Naoto is depressed because he doesn't know where Yellow Devil is. Takuma decides to enter the Hell in the Hole tournament to find Yellow Devil. It wasn't totally clear. And he teams up with Kevin, uh, our boy Kevin. And meanwhile, the nurse, Daisuke's nurse Rory, asks Naoto to take her to a pro wrestling match like he promised. So he's like, "Oh boy, I got a date." But wouldn't you know, Haruna enters him to fight in the same match where he's supposed to be attending with Rory. So there's this extended sequence of him running back and forth and dressing up as Tiger Mask and then appearing as Naoto so he can sit with Rory and then disappear and compete as Tiger Mask. And she seems kind of calm and uninterested in the fact that it takes him like a half hour to get a hot dog and that he doesn't actually get a hot dog after all that time,
Right.
and he misses the whole Tiger Mask match. And she's like, "Oh well." Um, anyway, but she decides that pro wrestling is so much fun that she's going to accept a job working at the GWM Max Dome as a nurse. So she's going to be a wrestling nurse from now on. And wouldn't you know it, Tiger Mask's next match is at the Max Dome. But what if Rory sees him? So, anyway, do you want to just talk about the good episode first?
Yeah, so I don't have a lot to say about it because I mean it's what makes it fun is the fact that this is actually like a really well animated like there's a lot of energy during this fight and it's something that's been missing for a long time. There's like a lot of like exaggerated shots. I always love the effect of when hits happen you get like those giant air bursts.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's pretty standard for a lot of sports series, but they're always hype when they happen. I won't lie. Tiger Mask's like killer move is generally pretty fun. Like, cause he does like this flying like knee slam into the chest, and then sort of like lifts them up and swings them around,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of like crushes them with the spine, and then just sort of throws them off, and then kind of like dives on them. You know, it's a big flashy move. That's I think it's a fun way. It's kind of a fun killer move. I'll give him that. Though I do also have to say, I don't entirely know how that's actually more effective than what Tiger Mask did to Naoto, which was just knee him in
You
the
mean
face.
Takuma?
Takuma, sorry, what did I say?
You said Naoto, but that's
Oh,
the
my
same
bad.
person.
I'm sorry, I meant Takuma.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's where he just sort of does a flying knee straight into his eyes. Like I don't know how that's how your actual killer move is more effective than that, but you know what? It's fine. Uh, And then, my only other takeaway from that was just, like, I mean, do you want to just talk about the Diva match real quick? Uh,
Not really.
Not really. I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at, because it feels like it was there to fill out the episode,
Yeah, and show
because
some
they kind of
boobs.
realized during production they really did not have enough to kind of get through this this match against Yellow Devil, so they just kind of had to throw in this random Diva match.
With new characters who'd never been introduced before, but who
Right.
both have boobs, so look at that. You
Yeah,
know?
look at that for a while. They even give out the measurements. I don't even know why I'm
Yeah,
surprised,
that
but
was kind of gross.
I mean that's just par for the course,
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
but the announcer's like, "Well, wouldn't Japanese fans want to know their measurements?" It's like, would they? I hope not.
Yeah, I mean that's just kind of creepy, guys.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so let's just talk about episode 14 now, if you don't mind.
I don't. Well, yeah, and all I'll say is that like if someone hasn't seen Tiger Mask, you would probably have a pretty good time with the show if you just watch was it episode 4
Yeah,
with
the Red Death
Red
Mask.
Death Mask and then episode 13 with Yellow Devil because those are the
Yeah,
two
these are the two highlights.
they're the two good episodes.
Yeah, effectively, and really just like for episode 13, really just skip like the first 5-6 minutes or
Yeah.
so.
All right, so episode 14 with all the drama.
With all the drama. Okay, so so there are a lot of really weird scenes in this episode that don't initially seem that odd until you start to think about them. The major one is so there is a scene where we have Billy the Kid Man just sitting down mid-air in a plane.
Yeah.
All of a sudden Takuma bursts in from off screen and is like, "So what? Who's the real Yellow Devil?"
Yeah.
You did you guys boarded the plane together, I assume. You guys have had I'm just imagining this whole process of them getting to the airport, checking in their luggage at customs, just get very calmly getting onto the plane, waiting like hours for them to actually get midair before
Yeah.
Takuma just finally bursts and is like, "Who was Yellow Devil?"
Yeah, and then he kicks him in the stomach.
It's like, did you guys not have a chance alone together before you got on the plane?
Yeah.
Because the way it's treated is just like Billy the Kid Man is just kind of sitting there, sort of dejected and tired and sort of beaten. Like, okay, finally, I'm just going home. And then all of a sudden, Takuma just has this outburst out of nowhere. And then there's this other great scene towards the beginning of the episode when Ruri calls Naoto, and she's like, "Hey, Naoto, do you remember our promise?" And Naoto just has this dazed look in his eye. Pause it, and he just goes, "Yes." Like, and then she explains to him, yeah, we're gonna go see a wrestling match together. And Naoto's just like, "Oh yes, of course, that's what we're going to go do." And it's like, did Naoto get weirdly real there by like trying to like hide the fact that he totally forgot about something? Like that was a strangely real, weird, like human reaction. Like not one that I expect out of this series of somebody who's just trying to kind of like get out of like having to explain themselves. It's
Hmm.
like, yeah, yes, I did. Uh, oh, and then there's the fact that Naoto just gave away, like, so their winnings he just sort of donated.
Yeah,
Like, because
well,
they won 100.
he won a
Go ahead.
$100,000, and he
Right.
gave it away because it was like impure GWM money.
Yeah, basically. And it's like, I feel like, so you can almost argue, like, with the original Tiger Mask, that you could argue that the original Tiger Mask was probably kind of down on his luck, and, because, he had this whole thing, I think, with this orphanage that they talked
Uh
about,
huh.
how he helped out, like a specific orphanage, so he probably, like, you could probably get away with, like, doing things with, like, his money and why he's never able to do much more, because, he's always investing in these kids. Naoto doesn't really have much more motivation than I want to beat Yellow Devil,
Yeah.
but they have to kind of keep up this illusion that Naoto is still like he's still this great hero. So it's like, oh yeah, he donated the money to who? I don't know.
Exactly, to someone.
He donated it to someone. And that's why they're like constantly gonna be like down on your luck. It's like at the very least, can you invest in maintenance for your secret ultra training gym?
Do something.
Like, and there's that other great scene in that gym too, where he's being lifted up by this like training robot. Sort of grabs him, lifts him up, sets him back down, and Naoto is like, "Hey, can we call it quits for the day?"
Hmm.
And because it's like I'm tired from my match, and it's like, Naoto, just tell them you have a date.
Yeah.
Like, why are you not like? Why? It's like, I guess like they have this really silly explanation as to why Naoto doesn't want Rory to know he's Tiger Mask because apparently he doesn't see himself as Tiger Mask.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure why the counter to that isn't just, well, then tell her you're the one who's wearing the Tiger Mask in the ring and you're carrying on his will. I don't know, whatever stupid thing. Just tell her your conundrum here.
Mm-hmm.
But fine, whatever. I don't understand why he won't explain to his coach or to Haruna that, he's got a date.
Yeah.
Like, I
It's
could use
it's
some help
like
here, guys.
it's just some dirty little secret he can't tell anyone.
Right, well, because his whole thing is like, oh, we're not on a date, we're just going out to see wrestling together.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this show is kind of marketed towards 10-year-olds, so maybe that's just like how a 10-year-old would react to the situation.
I guess that's fair.
Um,
But it's like, dude, can you just, like, explain something to people? Like, explain anything to these people.
yeah, I guess. So speaking of explaining thing, that not a good segue. We do have one other new show for this season that we have decided to push towards the end of our
Yeah.
episodes for reasons that we'll explain. It is Minami Kamakura High School Girls Cycling Club, or Minami if you want to, not have a
Yeah.
mouthful.
Minami Kamakura.
Yeah.
But anyway. Okay, so we begin this episode with Hiromi riding her bike to school, and she doesn't know how to do it because she doesn't even understand that she needs to turn the pedals on her bike.
Right.
Um, and so but she remembers and she starts writing, and she ends up running into a character by the name of Tomoe, who kind of knows how to ride bikes because, well, I mean, she's been riding bikes
For any amount of time. Yeah.
for any amount of time. And they end up running into one another. Tomoe helps Hiromi, like, with her bike, and they end up riding off around Kamakura because Hiromi is new to town and she hasn't seen much of it yet. So just before they get to school, because they're both going to the same school, they decided to just take a quick tour of the city, kind of show her some of the sights. Along the way, they run into somebody by the name of Shiki, who's going to be a teacher at their school. And they go to school. They go to they go to their kind of like they're like kind of like not commencement, but they're kind of like opening segment that they have at schools. They're kind of introduction, like, welcome to our school. And then the episode ends with them attempting to ride bikes. Did I miss anything?
No. No.
There is almost nothing in this first episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to put an article link in our description for this episode. If you want to look at it, please do so. Basically, it's an interview with the director of the show. He's very insistent during this interview that this is not a PR video for the city of Kamakura. Our takeaway from this episode was this is a PR video for the town of Kamakura.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So there's so many idyllic shots of the city, like, so the cherry blossoms are sprouting, like, and like anytime the cherry blossoms are in scene, the petals are always like they're always raining down. Like, there is never a sequence when the cherry blossoms are in view where they are not just gently floating across the screen,
Yeah.
like almost like snow. Uh, what was the amazing line we heard about where it's just like, wow, this is such a beautiful view here at Kamakura.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them, but your first introduction to Tomoe, she's standing in front of the train station and saying,
Right.
"Wow, this sure is a pretty train station in
Right.
my hometown that I've always lived in, but I just feel the need to explain this out loud of how
Oh,
attractive the Kamakura train stations are."
no, I remember the line that really got us was when they were on the tour, and I think it was Hiromi who goes, "This is one of Kamakura's ocean views."
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because
Like, what an odd thing to specify.
well, what got me about it was that everything seemed new to Hiromi the whole episode. So,
Right.
she was surprised by the fact that bikes have pedals and brakes because
Right.
she hasn't, been conscious for most of her life. And then, like, yes, we get it that she's new to town and she hasn't lived in Kamakura very long, but she's literally never seen the ocean that is a bike ride away from her house.
Right, and here, let me just point out a couple things here. I'm just going to confess right now, I don't know how to ride a bike. I can't ride a bike. I never grew up. Maybe at one point I used to ride on training wheels like when I was a real little kid, but I never got past that. Uh, I know that you pedal the dang pedals to move the bike.
Yeah, exactly. Like she just sat on the bike and like leaned forward and yelled and was surprised that the bike didn't go forward. Like,
Right.
what kind of person is this?
Right. And it's like so she's like surprised by the ocean view there. I've been to Japan. Ocean views are everywhere.
Yeah. It's a long, thin island.
It's a very long, thin island, and like unless you've only lived in the mainland, like straight in the center of the country for all of your life, how can you be this surprised by the ocean view, specifically the one of Kamakura?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a real, this is a real weird show, and there's so many like there's a lot of really pervy shots during this episode that aren't like overtly pervy, but they just kind of have like the camera rest on the girl's chest for just like maybe 1 or 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then they just sort of cut away from it, or like you move into a scene and you're just staring at the girl's chest, and that's about all you get.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, man, what is this show?
Yeah, I have no idea, but it did continue, and we got a second dose.
Oh, yes. Let me go on there. So this one has a little bit more meat to it. So this episode begins with Hiromi and Tomoe going on their tour of the city, uh, and so they're being given bikes by somebody. Are
Mm-hmm.
they like at a bike rental shop, or is that like Tomoe's father? I don't know who that was. But he says that they only have 2 bikes left, and one of them has like special gears, so Tomoe has to ride the one with gears. Uh, and for she doesn't seem to understand how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there's this whole sequence where their teacher ends up joining them as well for their tour. I think they just kind of run into her and she wants to join. And they get to a shrine, and what happens is their teacher falls asleep on Tomoe's shoulder, or was it even her lap?
Yes, it was on her
She fell
shoulder.
asleep. Yeah, she's on the shoulder. So while this is going on, for some reason, Hiromi wants to ride on Tomoe's bike for some reason. Anyway, what happens is she ends up riding on her bike, chases a squirrel, and then gets completely lost. And so the entire episode is about basically Tomoe and Shiki trying to track down Hiromi. And now during this episode, we get some cutaways to the seemingly unrelated plot with this rich girl by the name of Fuyune, who's like a photographer. She's kind of set up because there's a scene where she's trying to take a picture of some birds, and Hiromi's being very loud and boisterous, and she scares away the birds. But anyway, she's being chauffeured home by her butler, and as they're sitting there in traffic, Fuyune sees a bike, and she's like, oh, and like the butler says something like, oh, well, it must be nice to ride a bike since you don't have to deal with traffic. And this, apparently, Fuyune is like, okay, never mind, let's go to a bike shop. I would like 1 bike, please.
Yeah.
Uh, and then there's another cutaway to this cafe, and Shiki calls this cafe, and the girl's the owner of this cafe is Shiki's sister, and there's this bike group there, this male bike group, that apparently she has these lovely walnut jam rolls, and she promises them to these guys if they can track down Hiromi. And while she's there, a girl walks up to the cafe and is like, "Can I get my bike fixed, please?" And Shiki's sister goes, "Sorry, we're not a bike shop. We're a cafe." And then the next shot is of Shiki's sister fixing the bike.
Right.
And anyway, so there's a lot of hijinks with Hiromi. She meets up with this old woman who loses her apples, and she gives her a single tiny apple. And she finds her way up to this shrine because the old lady directed her. It's like, oh well, there's a shrine up there.
I think they were tomatoes. That's
Oh,
why
were they
they were.
tomatoes?
That's why
Oh,
they were tiny.
okay, they looked like apples to me. This show is not terribly well animated.
Yeah.
Anyway. When she's up there, she discovers, oh, this is the wrong shrine. I would have thought, she wouldn't recognize the path, but whatever. And she meets a young girl up there who's like an artist, and she talks to the girl, and apparently the girl has been drawing shrines, so she's able to identify, or Hiromi is able to identify the shrine based on her drawing, even though it's just like a shot of the gate. And she decides to lead her back to the shrine that Tomoe was at. But then while she's there, the guys track her down and take her to the bike shop, or take her down to back to the cafe. And then she meets up with Shiki and Tomoe there. Fuyune has shown up as well because she wants a bike because there's a bike shop connected to this cafe, which is why there's all this confusion. And this girl with the short hair is still there. And then they all decide to go ride over to the adjacent island together. And that's kind of where the episode ends.
Mm-hmm.
This is such a weird, convoluted way to get all of these girls together. Because so Higa her name is Higa Natsumi. She's a short hair girl. Uh, we've seen her in the opening, so we already know she joins this little group. Same with Fuyune. And and I guess that's the whole point, is getting all of these girls together and wanting to ride bikes. Even though Fuyune didn't really care about the bike itself, it seemed like she was just kind of impulsive and just wanted to get out of traffic faster.
Mm-hmm. Well,
like, this isn't really establishing a love of bikes for her.
no, she's just like a rich girl who saw a thing and decided to buy it.
Right, exactly. And this is such a weird, convoluted episode with all of these different, like, completely random plot points being jumbled together. And especially because, like Higa has absolutely no connection to these girls whatsoever. She was there to get her bike fixed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but she just gets like lumped in with everyone else and like, oh well, let's go explore Kamakura together, all of us as friends. And we're like, I mean, I guess because they find out that she also goes to the same high school as them, she gets roped into
Yeah.
it, and she has no personality, so she doesn't say no.
Basically. And I guess Fuyune they recognize as actually being as part of their class with Shiki, even though Shiki doesn't recognize Fuyune at first.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I guess the explanation for the bike shop is that the owner is gone. The bike shop that's like adjacent to this cafe is gone, but they'll be back soon apparently.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was just that people went up to, saw that there was a bike shop. The bike shop was closed, but they misinterpreted and thought the cafe was the bike shop, and I don't know.
Yeah,
It
it's
was kind
so
of
weird.
like and although the cafe isn't the bike shop, they basically are a bike shop because they do repair bikes, you know.
Right.
And everyone eating there is a cyclist who has been out riding. Those three random guys, including this was the most important part of the episode. Did you notice that there was one of the male
Uh,
characters was named Alpaca?
yes, I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah, and he literally says "paca," just like the stupid
I,
alpaca shop owner in Long Riders.
Why are there two girl cycling series that deal with alpacas? I don't understand this.
Yeah, the similarities for Long Riders are. I have to imagine they're random. I don't understand where the fixation on alpacas comes from, but
Right? Like, what's the connection between alpacas and biking? I don't understand this.
I don't know. You'd think like mountain goats would beat out alpacas, right?
You
Like,
would think that. I don't know. I know some people who live in Japan. I'll ask them about it, see if they know anything about it. This is just so baffling to me about how both of these series can have such can have like alpaca themed cycling.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to bring up with Minami Kamakura is the shorts at the end of each episode.
Yep.
So at the end of each episode, they cut to live action segments for several minutes with two members of a pretty small idol group in Japan
Yeah.
called AOP, uh, acting like really confused ditzy girls who are
Yep.
learning about what bikes are, and they just stand around with this owner of a Japanese bike shop and talk about how to pick out what bike you should ride.
Right. So like the end of the first one had a segment about the different types of frames and just sort of explaining what the different frames are for.
Yeah.
And then what was the second
It
segment again?
was
I've
about
already
like the
forgotten.
size of bike. So how to determine what size of bike you should get by like
Gotcha.
how tall you are.
Right. Yeah. And it's just like so this is clearly if they have an idol group who's like talking about the end of this, like this is clearly a show meant for guys.
Uh-huh.
Like otaku. Like same way that Long Riders was, but like a little bit more overtly, I would say, if they have like some sort of deal with AOP, who we did look up, and apparently their gimmick is that they love anime.
Yeah, they're girls who love anime.
Right. So right there, like that feels like the whole like the creepy appeal of like guys with like gamer girls, if you know that whole thing, and
Yeah.
like the whole thing is like, ooh, a girl is playing games, that's hot. It's like, oh, these idol girls love anime. Oh man,
Yeah, exactly.
like
I don't know.
it's
I
like
mean, it also communicates the fact that this show is on such a tight budget that they need the last 4 minutes of every episode to be live action interviews.
right, but I have to imagine that there's like a brand deal going on there because I mean I can't imagine that they. I guess unless it's like a promotional thing for AOP, like maybe they're paying them to promote their
Who knows
groups
who's
to.
getting paid? But
Right,
the girls from AOP are wearing the jerseys from the anime.
right. The
Um,
jersey because we have actually not seen yet in the actual series
well,
outside of
yeah,
like the opening.
right, exactly. Um, we need to wrap up with somehow. I mean, because we've had to do 2 episodes for each show, we've gone a little long.
Right,
So that won't be the norm for the rest of the season, I hope. But anyway, the we need to wrap up with TQ. So
of course.
like we said, TQ is not a new show, but it is one that we said we would get through, so we're gonna get through it. So the way we're doing it is because it is a set of 2 minute shorts. And there's 12 episodes per season, so it's basically ultimately it's the length of a little longer than a normal episode. So we're gonna do one season per week. So this week we
Right,
both watched season 1 of TQ. And so the plot, it's basically a gag anime, so there's not
yeah,
much in the way of plot. But the plot effectively just introduces the main characters. So there's 4 girls in the show. The main character is Yuri, who joined the soft tennis club because she's played tennis before. And then there's 3 second years named Konoe, who is short and has pink hair and likes to defy physics. Nasano, who has short brown hair. She's very rich, and her dad appears to be Colonel Sanders. Uh, and Marumo, who has long blue hair. She's very tall, and she eats underpants. Um, and those are the girls of the club. So it just sort of follows random gag hijinks.
right,
And there's not much in the way of development because each episode is like a standalone series of jokes basically.
right,
So I think we just go through some of the ones that stood out. Like in the first episode, Yuri is playing tennis with Konoe, and Konoe realizes that Konoe is completely incapable of playing tennis.
right.
And when her lack of experience is exposed, she blames a conspiracy on the Japanese government, which I thought was pretty funny.
Right.
Um, I like
There's one gag I liked a little later on. I don't even remember what episode it was, but there's this whole thing about how Kanoe defies the laws of physics. How just when they start getting a bit more of the group together, they have to play a doubles game, but they're
yeah.
missing a member, so Kanoe just splits in two.
Yeah, she just becomes two of herself. They're like, wait, you can't defy physics. She's like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Just don't worry about it. I got this.
I liked the episode where they go to Kanoe's house.
And it turns out to not be her house.
Well, come on,
Like,
man.
despite the fact that
Don't
her
no
mother is.
spoilers. Come on.
Oh, sorry.
The
Well, sorry, that was the gag.
Yeah, well, that was there were actually two things I thought were funny in that where Kanoe's mom they walk in and it looks like there's a corpse in the front, but
Right.
then they realize, oh, it's not a corpse, it's just a doormat that looks like a corpse. But then it turns out it's not a doormat that looks like a corpse. It's her mom pretending to be a doormat that looks like a corpse, which I thought was
Right.
so.
Which also adds to the gag at the end about the fact that it's not her house. Then what was her mom doing there?
Exactly. And that includes the fact they find a creepy stain on one of
Right.
the posts that looks like a face, and they're like, oh man, why is this face here? That's so creepy. Why does that stain exist
Right.
in the wood? And then Konoe reveals that it's because the way she sleeps is she just leans her face against a post and leans into the wall all night. So that's actually
There's kind of a fun episode about where they go to the swimming pool. I do like that gag where they're complaining that it's raining because this was supposed to be their big pool day.
Yeah.
So Nasuno hires a military group to take over the news and proclaim that it's going to be sunny today.
Yeah, and they're like, that doesn't affect anything.
That doesn't actually work.
Yeah. Um, I like there was an episode where they focus on practicing tennis, and they at the end of it, Yuri decides that an anime about tennis is actually pretty boring, so they shouldn't do that anymore.
Sick Prince of Tennis burn.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I mentioned it before, but I appreciate the ongoing gag about Nasuno's dad being Colonel Sanders, because there's this whole thing in Japan with KFCs where they have statues of Colonel Sanders sitting outside,
Yeah.
but in this they're like, no, that's just her dad and he sits outside KFC.
They do. I like the reveal at that end of the episode where, because this episode is about Nasuno trying to prepare like she's making something for her dad's birthday,
Yeah.
just like as kind of her gift to him, and like they're standing outside the KFC, and then there's like a helicopter descending. And then the very last shot of the episode is her handing the food to Colonel Sanders, who gets up and takes it. It's like, wait, so then the helicopter's completely unrelated?
Yeah, yeah. There's just a helicopter there for no reason. Um, yeah, the final episode of the season ends with them hitting their tennis ball outside the court, and they have to go retrieve it from the haunted former school.
Right.
Um, and they keep trying to Marumo keeps trying to convince them to just replace the tennis ball with a chick, like a baby chicken. They're
That they
like,
just found.
it's fine, it's yellow and fuzzy. Let's just it's good enough. And they're like, no, you can't. The chicken cannot be a tennis ball. And then they go through the haunted school, and they walk through, and then they all die because the
Right.
school is haunted. And the end of the season is a narrative where Yuri briefly says, "But it's okay because we all returned to our bodies through sheer willpower." And it ends on a title card of like aim for Wimbledon, but then they cross out Wimbledon and say aim for a second season. So there's this ongoing joke about how they're afraid the show is going to get canceled the whole time.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we already know that's not really a concern.
Yeah.
They made it through.
Yeah.
I think you kind of enjoyed this one a little bit more than I did, but I can kind of appreciate its just general. Like, this is a show that does not care.
Mm-hmm.
And I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Like, it's very open about how very little it cares for about anything regarding continuity, or really anything that makes any sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it'll be fun to see where it goes, just because I
Right.
imagine that they're going to build up all these inside jokes and then just layer them and layer them and layer them.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think it'll be fun. I think probably moving forward we'll just focus on like identifying a few of the jokes that we thought stuck out from each season.
Yeah, because I mean, how else do we do this? We can't really talk about any form of narrative or
Themes, yeah.
themes. Theme is it doesn't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for joining me today, as always, Matt. I always appreciate your presence.
I always appreciate your input, and I'm looking forward to getting back on a regular schedule with this season
Yeah.
next week. And
Yeah, end of the year kind of killed us there, but I'm kind of glad we're kind of going back to weekly. So if you wouldn't mind, would you please hit the credits?
it's my pleasure as always.
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is koshiencast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We will be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.